Triple H has raised a little bit of hell when asked about the NWA Women's Only show. His comments about equality have certainly caught fire, especially considering he seems to have forgotten that he actually does host a male-only show, 205 Live. There are no women wrestling on 205 Live. And he did say during his comments there, if I was hosting a male-only show, that would be seen as sexist. I'm paraphrasing here. This is not a direct quote situation. I don't have the direct quotes right here. So I think he needs to be a little more self-aware when it comes to that. As regards Evolution 2.0, so purely bringing this women's only show back to a WWE standpoint right now, Evolution 2.0 has been discussed to no end. A lot of sources have repeatedly stated that it's coming. I mentioned quite a while ago now when they showed Evolution 1 on a major sports network. I believe it was ESPN. And I reported at that time WWE would be closely watching the numbers to see what interest there was in an Evolution 2.0. The reason they did that is because interest was low in Evolution 1. The original Evolution did not get as many buys as a typical pay-per-view would. That said, I still think Evolution was the show of the year. That's just my opinion. Show of the year. And really, Triple H needs to be at least trying to approach different audiences and subgenres, as it were, in the way that Vince McMahon does. Vince McMahon tries to reach everyone at once. Triple H seems to have his fan base, and he wants to keep them and forget everyone else. You don't do business that way. Evolution 2.0 right now seems farther away than ever, especially with women now wrestling at Saudi Arabia shows. That really is why they have decided not to follow up with further Evolution shows. The entire reason for Evolution was to fight off the backlash that the WWE had for having the male-only Saudi Arabia shows, to give the women in the card something to do, to book a few more dates. Essentially, it was a house show that was televised and they were able to sell it to the pay-per-view. This is something they're not considering when they talk about maybe low interest and a low buy rate. Fact is, they made a lot of money from that show because costs were extremely low. As regards Saudi Arabia shows, Natalya, by the way, is expected to wrestle again at this year's Saudi Arabia event, currently in the planning, not yet confirmed, likely in a tag team match, most likely right now a tag team title match alongside Tamina. Mickie James stated whenever she asked about Evolution 2.0, she was told that women's only shows don't draw. She was apparently shown some stats that back this up, but at the same time, you have to commit to the first one and then continue. If you did WrestleMania and then didn't do WrestleMania 2, WWE would have lost to WCW in an absolute walkover, and so on and so forth. There's lots of nuance there, but you get what I'm saying. Evolution did not make the same money as a typical WWE pay-per-view. That's true. But it was also one of their most successful shows for social media, for cost benefit, and one of their most valuable long-term commodities. If you look at, for example, YouTube views, you look at merchandise sales from those shows, you look at how they built Ronda Rousey, the use of Nikki Bella. They had the people. So I'm not particularly happy with Triple H's comments here. There are also backstage many in the WWE that believe Evolution was only possible due to Ronda Rousey's participation. And for years now, the WWE have been trying to get Ronda Rousey back into a ring, and it's been an absolute no-go. She was apparently under contract for 3 years, however she was only there for 1, which of course raises many questions. There are also many that believe that without Rousey, women still would not have main evented WrestleMania. Even though we had a night 1 main event this year, it is telling that so far there's only been 1 actual main event of WrestleMania for the women. Let's catch up on the comments and see what people are saying. Matt says that was a weird media call. It's very typical, to be completely honest. Michael said they didn't like his comments at all, which I think is absolutely fair. Matt says, to be fair, no one watches 205 Live. That's what they're saying about Evolution as well, unfortunately. Chris rightly points out his job is to either appeal to old fans or gain a new fan base. He's doing neither, so I don't know why he's having a go. Triple H obviously runs NXT, and he oversees a lot of the international development. So, for example, NXT UK, the promotion of NXT Asia, where he's currently in the going, NXT India, when they eventually launch that as well. Triple H is in this very difficult position whereby he had a completely captive audience. He's used to booking NXT for people who've already committed to paying for the network. Now he's going out to a casual audience, and that's why the WWE proper and the main roster are more involved creatively than ever, because Triple H doesn't seem to know how to book a show for casuals, which is one of the reasons NXT and AEW weren't able to catch up as much as you would like. Matt says, even though Mickie James and Maria Kanellis were told Evolution 2 isn't happening, Evolution 2 apparently isn't happening. This is what we're saying on this. Eleanor says, I need Evolution 2. I would love to have another Evolution show. I really enjoyed it. I think it was a really well put together show with lots of different generations, different brands, different uses of talent. The Battle Royal was fantastic, I felt. And then we had 2 main events, which were brilliant in completely different ways. Their match of the year was at Evolution. To honestly sit there and say that doesn't have value is absolutely ridiculous. Welcome Jay Quick to the show. Thank you very much for the host. Really do appreciate that. Michael says they have such a tiny women's division, women's roster now. They do if you only factor in Raw and SmackDown. They have a lot of women in NXT and a lot of women currently in the developmental section. They also, via NXT UK, have a lot of women who have sort of passive contracts. People who aren't there every week and maybe don't have full-time contracts, but could be used a lot more. You could offer a full-time contract to Candy Floss. You could offer a full-time contract to Isla Dawn. You could offer more contracts to a lot of people and get them a lot more involved. This is one of the reasons we've had another women's tryout recently at NXT UK. So, as we know, there are likely to be more releases soon, particularly as we go further down the divisions. So they've had a lot from the main roster. They will then be filled up by people from NXT. Then there'll be releases from NXT. Then those NXT releases will be filled up by people from NXT UK and 205. And then these tryouts will be used to fill up NXT UK, 205 Live, and any spare developmental slots required for NXT. This is why we are having all of these tryouts at the moment. Matt says, I was one of those who wasn't interested in the first one, but then the show happened and I enjoyed it. I don't think that, and I've got to be completely honest here, the WWE basically forgot to promote Evolution. If you think back, the WWE basically ignored the fact that it is happening, or that it was happening at all, and then it completely blew us all out of the water. The only people who were promoting it were the women on the card. I think it's very telling about wrestling in general that women know how to promote themselves and their matches. Why do they know how to do that? Because they have to. Because they've been forced to, because of the lack of opportunities that they get. They have had to become very, very good at social media to force the hand of wrestling companies. To force their hand. And when you look at a lot of men, even at the top level, they're not even interested in self-promotion. They let the WWE or other companies do it all for them. Women wrestlers cracked social media way before anyone else. They are way ahead of the game, especially if you look at Becky Lynch, nailed it early. Rhea Ripley nailed it early. She knew who to go after. She knew who to go after. And there are thousands of them. Thousands of examples of women who know how to promote themselves in every walk of life because they've been forced to learn fast just to keep up with opportunities given elsewhere. Sorry, went on a bit of a rant there. Michael says, I like how Triple H just pretends that there is equality. We know, particularly as regards to recent releases, they have disproportionately affected the women. They have. The women's division is much smaller than the men's divisions. Even just that. Divisions. The men have multiple divisions, the women just have one. They only really have one title to chase. I know that they have the tag titles, but there's literally 2 tag teams left in the whole goddamn company right now. So I don't think that really counts. There is much less women hired, and yet the same amount of women, roughly, I think actually exactly, have been released from the main roster as men. It's disproportionately affecting them as well. Things aren't equal. Matt says there is rumours of Bea Priestley coming into NXT UK. There are. I think that's likely at this point. I'd find it very entertaining at that point that World of Sport, their opening women's feud was Kaylee Ray, Bea Priestley and Piper Niven. They would all then be in NXT UK. And Eleanor says, if I was WWE, I wouldn't want an Evolution 2 until Becky Lynch is back. I think the issue is, waiting is what stopped it already. I think at some point you have to go with the women you've got. Because if you don't treat the women you have as stars, I don't think they then become stars. I think it's like if you didn't push Karrion Kross to this level, people wouldn't take him this seriously and wouldn't now be thinking maybe he's not living up to the hype, because he wouldn't have hype anyway. If you look at Bray Wyatt, he was always treated as a star, which is why his 32% win record is so disappointing. Treat people like stars, you'll make them stars. But I think one of the main reasons we haven't had another Evolution is because of a lack of Ronda Rousey. Because they thought that's their only star. And she wasn't. She never was. Even just looking at Charlotte Flair, you've got a top level there. Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair, that was top level. You can do so much more, and you've just chosen not to. Ooh. Again, going on a bit of a rant here. I apologise. Or I don't. Whichever one floats your boat. Thank you, Michael, thank you. That is my commentary as regards Triple H's recent comments. I'm not going to sit here and do all the clickbait and make massive news of it as everyone else has. I disagree with his comments. When it comes to him saying all the best women's talent in the world is in WWE or wants to be here, I have no truck with that. He's defending his roster. Tony Khan would probably say exactly the same thing, to be completely honest. He would probably say exactly the same thing. So I have no issue with that. But his comments about equality, I don't agree with. That's going to be a pain in the arse video to edit down for YouTube tomorrow morning. Maz says, I guarantee you the second Ronda is back. That's when WWE announces Evolution 2. I wouldn't put it past them. Would not put it past them. To be fair, if Evolution 2 was headlined by Ronda Rousey and Becky Lynch, half the fucking world would tune in. Noob says, hello, Mr. Colohue, how are you doing? I'm doing good, Noob. Thank you very much for joining us. Hope you are well. Eleanor says, as much as I'd love an Evolution 2, first we have to take women's wrestling more seriously. As I mentioned in the past, we have to normalise women main eventing Raw, NXT, SmackDown and pay-per-views. Otherwise, they can't be equal to the men in terms of booking. I completely agree with you there, Eleanor. I think Sasha Banks has been fighting for that for a long time, and we are seeing results because of this. We recently had the Women's Tag Team Championship main event a WWE Raw, but they didn't promote it. I feel the WWE weren't confident enough to say, this is going to be our main event. Why? Go with it. Natalia's finally main eventing. She's earned it. I'm looking at all four women there. You've got Nia Jax, Tamina, Shayna Baszler. Huge amounts of talent. Natalia's been there so long. People have literally stood on her shoulders to get to the level where they are at now. She finally got a chance in the main event, and they basically didn't mention it. I completely agree. We have to normalise women in the main event. It's why I look at the rise of Becky Lynch, as it were. Someone's always got to go first. There's always got to be women main eventing before women are quote-unquote ready to main event. Someone's got to go first. It has to happen. If the story doesn't quite validate it, as it were, tough shit. At some point, someone's got to go first, because then it begins the normalization process. That should have happened way before it did, but it did. It finally happened. Then we followed up. We had Evolution. We had the TLC main event where it was Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, Asuka and Kairi Sane. That was a fantastic main event, slightly ruined by the injury, but still, it was building up fantastically. I think, personally, Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks in the Cell could have been a main event, but they wanted to keep The Fiend on last for the main event. I reported on that at the time. That I posted something on SK the day after SummerSlam when The Fiend made its debut that Bray Wyatt would be main eventing from here on out. A couple of days later, Dave Meltzer reported the same, and it blew up a little bit. But it's one of those. I think that should have been a main event, and there are plenty of others. Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair, I get that being the main event of night one. Roman Reigns, Edge, Daniel Bryan, I think that storyline was a bit better. But there will be plenty of opportunities for women to main event. But will they? Will they? That's the question. Treat them like stars. They will become stars. Matt says, wasn't really a fan of Triple H's comment on the fans criticising how main roster uses NXT call-ups. He made some fair comments, I feel, in that, but he also made some unfair comments. He does have a history of biting the hand that feeds a little bit, and he probably shouldn't be doing that. It's weird because NXT promotes their women's main events all the time. They do. Triple H is a big proponent of women's wrestling. I don't think women's wrestling would be as prominent in WWE if not for Triple H championing it. And yet he says what he said. It's really confusing from where I'm sitting. And Noob says, like the women's tag team titles main event TLC back in 2019. That's exactly the one, yes. Matt says, kudos to Becky for protecting Kairi during that match. Indeed, they all came together really, really well on that one.